Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffing.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day, and check out our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. And check out our Altar Sleeve, support the show by using the code MAGICMICS at checkout for 5% off anything in the store. I'm Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, MTG Nerd Girl.
Hey guys, welcome back.
Ruben Bressler.
How's it going?
Y'all been to the D&D dungeons. Y'all been making
the
stories.
And the dragons.
Yeah.
That's right. Cool. They haven't met a dragon yet. Technically, they haven't been in a dungeon yet. So I'll have to work on that.
So y'all not on brand. We got to get on brand.
I know. I have to tell you, I am not sure I've ever fought a dragon in D&D before like last year.
Huh.
Like, it was because they're high level villains. You don't get to fight dragons all the time.
They'll kill you.
But the game is called Dungeons and Dragons, and you're like, where's the dragons at? It's not called goblins and like
and
robberies.
Waffles.
Goblins and pests.
Exactly. Right. It's humans and houses is the game that a lot of people play. But yeah,
a lot of it was the goblins and rats.
Yep.
Scary dark spaces.
Yep.
We also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention. Ruben will tell us who is the most eloquent, letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our colorless and land cards on Arena. Ruben?
Well, this comment stuck out to me, and it also was not. Well, I'm trying to make a fun segue, but I can't find it. This is a good comment from Plasma Wisp 18. My pick for honorable mention this week has a unique line of text not seen on any other Magic card. It's a mythic from a small set and is either my first pick for my Brawl deck or something I have to keep in mind if my opponents ever land one of their own. The Immortal Sun. It locks away those pesky walkers, draws you more gas, pumps your army, and gives a nice mana reduction. Unless you're the Super Friend deck, I don't see how any deck wouldn't benefit from a copy of the Immortal Sun.
The Immortal Sun was 6 generic mana, a mythic from Rivals of Ixalan. The pre-release Ruben and I did attend.
That's right.
It is a legendary artifact that says players can't activate Planeswalker's loyalty abilities. At the beginning of your draw step, draw an additional card. Spells you cast cost 1 generic mana less to cast. And creatures you control get +1/+1. It's just all the upside. Yeah.
Nice.
And it was a big story beat in the War of the Sparks storyline, as this was the thing that they brought to Ravnica to lock all the Planeswalkers in place, which we get the flavor of with not allowing you to activate their abilities.
Yeah, this was...
I've seen this thing surprise people when they expect to be able to use their abilities and then they get locked out, and it's always a fun board state.
Yeah, you got to be careful of the cards that, stop things and reduce damage, for example. It's a lot. But the Immortal Sun is sweet. The freaking thing is $25 plus because it's a mythic in Rivals, and not a lot of people enjoyed Rivals.
It's a colorless mythic in Rivals that draws cards and mana reduces. So it's playable in every commander deck.
I'll take it. And thanks for Plasma Wisp 18 for being a part of the show. Please contact us on social media, ideally Twitter DMs for your prize. Thanks again to CoolStuffing.com for sponsoring this giveaway. And stay tuned for our top 10 list this week, and maybe you can win next week's free gift certificate. Because it is time to talk about Scars Mirrodin plus Mirrodin Besieged. You could arguably get 10 from both, but I kind of felt like there's probably 5 or 6 from both. And then together, they're 2 great tastes and all that. And but yeah, this period of Magic I was absolutely enthralled with. This was definitely the period which I started like traveling around the world and stuff to cover Magic, so it's very near and dear to my heart. But I don't even get to start with number 10 because it's higher on someone else's list. So Ruben, what's your number 10?
My number 10 is just a good workhorse kind of card. We got spoiled, I think, with a lot of the equipment that came along in this block. But it is easy to forget that this card was a staple piece of maybe the most powerful modern era Pro Tour winning deck of all time. Which of course was Caw-Blade. Ben Stark won Pro Tour Paris in 2011. The Caw-Blade deck took Standard by storm, and it had one copy along with 4 Stoneforge Mystics. It had one copy of Sylvok Lifestaff, ladies and gentlemen. 1 generic mana. gets you a common artifact from Scars of Mirrodin. The equipped creature gets +1/+0, and whenever the equipped creature dies, you gain 3 life. This card was incredibly important in not getting run over by the vampire decks. It made your Squadron Hawks 2/1s that gained you life when they died, which was incredibly important against both mono red and mono black at the time. And 2/1 flyers, that's nothing to sneeze at. That thing can take out a Jace, that thing can take out, that deals twice as much damage as a regular Squadron Hawk, and it was very, very cheap to play.
Tiny evasive creatures that, they can close out games much faster than you might think. And they, if your opponent doesn't have the answer for them because they tend to come out way too soon, then it's just kind of game over at that point.
Yeah, this isn't exactly the blade you think of them carrying when it comes to Call Blade, but
sure,
it can rack up pretty quickly when you start gaining 3 life per bird.
This was the blade you searched for against mono red and vampires. So
there you go. All right, Nerd Girl, what's your number 10?
All right. So my number 10 is a card that recently got a reprint. It's kind of a fan favorite. I think it's a pretty popular card. You see it a lot in cubes and in EDH and more casual gameplay, but also it sees its, has its time in the light every time it's in any sort of Eternal standard format or Eternal format, and that's Massacre Wurm.
Ooh.
Massacre Wurm, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, this got changed to Phyrexian, right? It's now a Phyrexian Wurm. So it's one of the creatures that got a nice little boost there when we, added to the Phyrexia world. And Massacre Wurm is a little thing is covering the cost here. It's a 6 mana, 3 colorless, black, Phyrexian Wurm that says when it enters the battlefield, creatures your opponents control get -2/-2 until end of turn. Whenever a creature an opponent controlled dies, that player loses 2 life, and it is a 6/5. So it's a huge beater that wipes most of your opponent's board and puts them on a pretty short clock.
Yeah, this is a giant monster of pain, and please be playing tokens so that I can see the look on your face when you count up the amount of life you're about to lose. It's devastating.
Yeah, this is a card that haunts my dreams. I lose to the trigger on this card a lot.
Yeah.
Just based on the decks I play. Even if I'm just playing mono red, I'm still just losing 8 life and getting my board wrathed. Much less if I'm playing a green-white token deck and I just immediately lose the game. And it's never as good for me when it's fighting for me. It's always like, here's a 6/5. That's maybe it. Maybe I'll kill one thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, lose 2 life.
But definitely is worthy of a top 10 slot, if for no other reason than the pain and anguish that it brings me.
This is one of those cards that I know I have specifically said to myself, there is no way I can lose this game. And there it is. And that's how you lose the game. All right. Let's move on here to number 9. I'll kick us off with our number 9. I love this stupid card. It's sweet. It's neat. It's not rare. It's not mythic. It's not $1 million. It's just great. And it's so good. It's like, I don't think they're going to make anything close to this probably for years to come. They kind of get close, sort of, but they don't really. Because, I'll be damned, how efficient is Galvanic Blast? Galvanic Blast is just efficiency on a magic card. It's a shock as your floor. 1 red, uncommon instant, was a common in Scars. They bumped it in Double Masters. It deals 2 damage to any target, but with Metalcraft, you just need 3 artifacts, and it deals 4 damage to any target for 1 mana. It's not additional mana. It's not you had to sacrifice something. It's just, congratulations, you unlocked the secret, and here's 1 mana, 4 damage.
Yeah, this is, a much better version than what we currently have in Standard, which was printed in the Kamigawa set, which makes you sacrifice an artifact to get the 4 damage. Having to have 3 is a harder requirement, but you never have to sack one, and that feels really good.
And it doesn't even hit any target. It only hits, creatures or whatever. So, or planeswalkers, I guess, right? So, this one just hits anything. It is powerful and wonderful, and I love it.
Yeah.
All right. Ruben, what you got for your number 9?
My number 9, this class of cards is just very, very good. And we didn't really get them for a long time. And these are flame breaks is what I'm going to call them. Because the original, to me, was Flamebreak, which was all the way back in Darksteel. What I'm talking about is 3 mana cards that deal 3 damage to all creatures.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they're almost always good. We've got like Sweltering Suns, we've got Fire Spout. There's a bunch of really good ones out there. Even at 4 mana, sometimes, Sulphurous Blast saw play.
Anger the Gods, yeah.
Anger the Gods, again, another great one. But the one that was here, the one that was in Mirrodin Besieged, also won a Pro Tour in the hands of Brian Kibler, and that is Slagstorm. Slagstorm is a generic, a red sorcery where you choose one. You either deal 3 damage to each creature, or you deal 3 damage to each player.
This was like, it's there to kind of help in games sometimes, but mostly just it wipes the boards of silly stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. If you can't find room for it, 3 damage will kill most things. So you could definitely put it in the, your main deck, depending on the rest of the format around it. But it's a great sideboard card.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this is a necessary effect in a lot of decks. Either main deck, as we saw with Wolf Run Ramp, where you wanted to get the small stuff out of the way and not get totally overrun by aggro creatures. But yeah, again, if you're in sort of a different type of matchup where you want to have Slagstorm access in the sideboard, it's a great option there as well.
Like, this came after Volcanic Fallout, as I recall, because there was Flamebreak, and then there was like nothing until really Volcanic Fallout, and then from here, this kind of started that trend of, okay, there's 3 mana, just wipe the board, sometimes deal damage to faces, get creative with it, sure.
Yep.
Nerd Girl, what's number 9?
My number 9 is my first of 3 hires, and I will not see you guys. I have 8 and 9 are both hires, so I'll see you guys in two cards.
All right. Well, my number 8 is also higher. So, Ruben, you have to pull us through here. Do you have a number 8?
I do have a number 8, and Ruben's list this week, ladies and gentlemen, is a very Ruben list, because my number 8 is an 8/8 for 8 mana, and it is also very expensive. $15 a piece from Scars of Mirrodin, and then also in Ultimate Masters. It is a premier reanimator target, and it is also very good with Madcap Experiment, because your life total can't change, and that card is Platinum Emperion.
Nice.
Platinum Emperion is an 8 mana 8/8 artifact creature golem. Your life total can't change. So premier reanimator target, because of the card Reanimate, you can't change that life total, so you just get it. Same with Madcap Experiment. Just get it out of your deck.
That's all it takes. You just show up, and then it just happens. And thanks.
Yeah.
Not changing life total is an interesting, unique thing that we don't see on a lot of cards.
Yeah, the cutting off the pain life is like the weirdest. You don't really think about it at the time, but there's a lot of cards like, you just can't force a will anymore, and that's a little silly. But sometimes you can't, and you need to. But
can't fetch land, can't force a will, can't Gitaxian Probe, also can't gain life. But more importantly, can't lose life when your opponent attacks you with a bunch of stuff.
That's right. Very cool. All right. So let's move here to number 7. Ruben, what's number 7?
My number 7 is a Cube All-Star. I picked this card very highly in all cubes, but especially the vintage cube, because people love to take power, and a bunch of the power are artifacts. And I had nothing I like better than taking my opponent's turn 1 Soul Ring with a Leonin Relic Warder.
Oof.
Leonin Relic Warder is a white for a cat cleric for a 2/2. So 2 mana 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile target artifact or enchantment. And when Leonin Relic Warder leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to the battlefield under its owner's control.
Yeah, this card was just like it's neat. It's kind of cool. It requires a good target. Like, it's just kind of aggressive enough to be right there where you need it to be. I think a 2/3 was probably too much. A 3/2, but at the time, a 3/2 I think was too much. But these days, for white would be like, really? You can't give us a 3/2? But yeah,
at 2/2, it still sees play in Modern. So
well, there you go. So
yeah, the targets are super relevant. There's a lot of important artifacts and things in this during Standard as well. So just having these in the deck, if not even in the main deck, in the sideboard, as a key piece to just remove your opponent's, pieces of their artifact deck that make the rest of it work is super important.
I guess one of the things that's surprising is that there's not a lot of repeats of this effect. You know what I mean? There's plenty of the, the
Tide Hollow Sculler, take stuff from your hand.
Yeah, Tide Hollow Sculler, or, exile the creature while this creature's on the battlefield. Plenty of that stuff. But where are the additional Relic Warders of the world? There's just the one.
Just the one. I mean, we got Skyclave Apparition, which is like probably the best white creature that they've printed in the last 5 years. And then Relic Warder is it beyond that. So taking out your opponent's Soul Ring early, taking out your opponent's Immortal Sun later. Mm-hmm. Yes, this is it.
Yeah, like how many Oblivion Rings do we have? We only have one Relic Warder. Nerd Girl, what's number 7?
All right, so number 7 is a card. Its cost hasn't really maintained with its popularity, but it's a very impactful card that to this day is sort of iconic for the set. And that's going to be Phyrexian Revoker.
Ooh.
Phyrexian Revoker is a 2 colorless horror that is a 2/1, and it says when Phyrexian Revoker enters the battlefield, name a non-land card. Activated abilities of sources with the chosen name can't be activated.
Including fetch lands, which is fantastic.
So non-land.
I'm sorry, you're right.
No, you're good. So and this was a confusion that happened a lot when this card first came out, was you could get fetch lands with Pithing Needle, but you couldn't get like Elvish Archdruid. This can't get fetch lands, but it can get mana abilities. And so this can name Moxes and Black Lotus in Vintage. This can name mana artifacts.
Birds of Paradise. Creatures.
Birds of Paradise is another great one.
Absolutely.
Or you could just name, Staff of Domination, or, artifacts that are trouble when they get activated. All for a 2/1. Like perfect 2/1 hate bear, colorless creature. This card's very, very good.
Yeah, Pithing Needle effects are just necessary for healthy formats. I think we've just seen that over the years. I've seen that in sort of my history with Magic. When you live in a world without the Pithing Needle effects, you start to feel it in really weird ways. I'm glad Phyrexian Revoker isn't very expensive. It's like a little over $1, because back when it was only the Mirrodin Besieged version, it started getting a little pricey because people started playing that thing more and more. But between Magic 2015 and Double Masters, it is affordable, which is great. And if it's either this creature and or effect, or it's a Pithing Needle, just straight up Pithing Needle or whatever, I think we need that in all of our standard formats. So let's move on, y'all, to my number 7, which I enjoy a lot. This card is fan-freaking-tastic. I love it. It's just also one of those cards that's super duper like plane dependent. This is not going to show up. This is, because it's both plane dependent and sort of the character, and plane dependent and sort of the mechanic. When it has both those things together, it's very hard for them to just throw it in any set ever. So you really only see this in maybe the list, or it's got to be a master set or whatever, because you're not going to see in the next, M set or D&D set Skithiryx, the Blight Dragon, show up. But this card is so dope. I absolutely love it. It is 2 black, 3 generic mana for a 4/4 mythic legendary dragon skeleton. There you go. It has flying, and of course, Infect, the first official appearance, I believe. This creature deals damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters, and to players in the form of poison counters. And for 1 black, it gains haste until end of turn. And for 2 black, you can regenerate it, which you don't know probably what that means if you've played recently. You're like, what the hell is regeneration? That means you can pay 2 black, and if it would be destroyed in combat, instead it is not. It's removed from combat. Or basically, if it takes lethal damage during combat, you would not give it lethal damage. You would remove it, and that's really weird to explain, and that's why I don't use it anymore. Yeah. But it's a great card.
Yeah, Regenerate is something that I think they've just decided to do away with, and I think the general Magic public is happy with that, and I agree. It didn't come up a ton in Limited, but I'm glad we're not seeing it anymore.
Yeah, I agree. It was overly complicated, and also couldn't get explained on Skithiryx because it has too many words on it. Mm-hmm. But this card is, it was the first appearance of Infect, in that this set had the first appearance of Infect. I mean, we've got a lot of creatures with Infect in the set. I think this was the only legendary one.
It was the first. Was it? Have we mentioned Infect so far? I don't believe we have.
I mean, there's other cards in Scars of Mirrodin that have it. Though.
Sure. I'm just talking about our top 10 is what I'm saying.
Oh, sure. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yes. Then in that case, yes,
absolutely.
It is our first reference of Infect. And it's also in part of an elite club of commanders that can kill an opponent in 2 swings. or even in one swing in many cases with Skithiryx. If you cast Hatred, for example, if you give this thing 10 power, you can just one-shot
murder your opponent out of nowhere. And that's what is so cool about this card. And this card, like, never saw any competitive play. Like, not even for a second. Like, not in the first weekend. Because, trust me, I wanted it to. If it had gotten anywhere close to a top 8, I would be talking about it right now. Because I desperately wanted this card to be good and constructed. And it just never was. And for a whole variety of reasons. And there were dragons that it would run into that didn't matter if you had Infect or not. And yada, yada, yada. All right, let's move on here to number 6. Now, my number 6 and my number 5 are higher, so I'll see you guys at number 4. But Ruben, what's number 6?
My number 6 is one of 2 hires on my list.
Ooh, well,
I can carry.
Let's do it. What's number 6?
All right. So I was, combing through both Scars and Besieged, and I wasn't really happy with any of the Planeswalkers. I mean, they're all solid, but nothing really jumped out at me that I needed to put on the list. But then I kind of thought about it, and I do think Tezzeret, Agent of Bolas, is super sweet. Mm-hmm. And he's still a $9-ish card. I think he's relevant for more casual gameplay, and also I think he's just very, very unique. So we've got a 4-mana 2 colorless blue-black Planeswalker, comes in with 3 loyalty. For the +1 ability, you look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal an artifact card from among them. Put that into your hand. Put the rest in the bottom of your library in any order. -1, it becomes a 5/5 artifact creature. Target artifact, any artifact you want. And then for the -4, it says target player loses X life. You gain X life, where X is twice the number of artifacts you control. So this fits in a very specific deck, and I think it's fun. I like it. It's unique, and he seems pretty sweet.
This was one of the first very specific Planeswalkers. Like, this was one of the very super niche. You're not going to play this in any other deck than exactly what this guy is doing. And before this, if I recall correctly, before this specific design, a lot of the Planeswalkers were just kind of sort of generic. They were aggro-y, or they were kind of control-y in Mind Sculptor and so on. But there was never you're going to be playing in this niche. And this was the first one to show people you could do that.
Right. Instead of just being good, this was specific. Right. I played this card in Legacy. Mm-hmm. I mean, this card's great. Mm-hmm. This card won Legacy tournaments, alongside such hits as Dimir Signet. You know what I mean? It also is a blue card, so you can remove it to Force of Will, which is not nothing for a 4-mana legendary permanent. Mm-hmm. And it ends games by itself. Turning something into a 5/5, that's huge. Drawing a card every turn, also huge. And then just fireballing your opponent. And every line of text on this card is relevant.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the first Planeswalker who could ultimate the turn after you played it. You can play it, you can +1 it, and then its ultimate can happen. But again, its ultimate's very unique and niche. The last part of this card that holds a super special place in my heart was that I had the opportunity to go to Worlds the year that this card was, basically in Standard, and they had a 3-story version of this card art in the sky and promoting Worlds, and it was so cool. And this card looks just as cool now, in small version versus 3 stories tall, which was great. All right, let's move on here to number 5. Ruben, what's number 5?
My number 5, I feel bad that I put it in my number 5 because it is a 4-mana 4/4.
You're doing that again.
I couldn't warrant putting much higher, but it also makes sense for me to not put it at 4 because it's a 4-mana 4/4 as a troll, because it is Thrun the Last Troll. Thrun the Last Troll is 2 generic green for a legendary creature, Troll Shaman. Listen to this, and if you don't like blue decks, this just warms the cockles of your heart. Mm-hmm. This spell can't be countered. Hexproof, generic and a green regenerate. This thing was the bane of control deck's existence, and I love it.
And it was designed to be. It was like, this is a surgical, like, scalpel to the heart of every control player. You can't stop it. You can't get rid of it. Like, it's difficult to kill. I think for a while, it was a minute before, when did Supreme Verdict come along in its sort of timeline here?
Return to Ravnica? That took a while.
Right. So, like, this lived for a long time. It's just like, oh my God, I have to deal with Thrun. I have to chump block it. Like, I got to do something about this stupid thing. And this is another example of just like, they're not likely to bring regeneration back. So it's hard to reprint this as well. And honestly, it's nice. It's only $4 or so.
Yeah. My favorite thing about cards like these is that how upset players who don't let anybody else play cards get when their cards don't do anything. It brings me joy. My heart grows 2 sizes that day. And yeah, it's great. I do like things that attack control players.
Yeah. I mean, there's no mistake. Last week we talked about Carnage Tyrant a ton. We talked about Thrun this week. Skragnoth is not a good creature, but it did like usher in an era of, you can't deal with this guy with 20 counter spells, which is great.
Yeah, this was preceded basically a year or two before hexproof actually became a word. There was a transition from Shroud to hexproof, and as those transitions happened, it came sort of slowly, and really showed how cool it was when you can target your own stuff, which is nice. Nerd Girl, what's number 5?
All right, number 5. We're going to start talking about cards that I think made a huge impact and are also very fan favorite, which is a big part of how I rate my cards. So this card is, still $12+ more if you get one of the fancier versions. And again, it's just a fan favorite. Everybody likes these cards except for when it's in the cube, because this has no business being in the cube, and that is going to be the Sword of Body and Mind. Please take it out of the cube, wizards. This is a 3-mana colorless artifact equipment that says equipped creature gets +2/+2, has protection from green and blue, and then whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you put a 2/2 green wolf creature token onto the battlefield, and that player puts the top 10 cards of their library into their graveyard. This has no business being in my limited games, but you can keep it in your EDH decks, please.
It's fine. If there were only like literally any sword, if Light and Shadow were on Arena, they could put it in there and say we have a sword in there. That's the only sword, and I get that it's the only sword. Why of all swords, of every single, you couldn't have put Sophie? You remember when it came out in that anthology and we were like, why of God's name of all the swords? Why this one?
It's very stupid.
I don't get it.
It's a good design. It's just horrendous for limited.
Yeah.
They need to alchemize this and mill you for 5.
Sure. To
make it playable in cube. Because anything that, like, if we're gonna put this in the cube, why don't we have Jace Memory Adept?
Right.
Why don't we just have, like, Glimpse the Unthinkable? Like, what are we doing here?
They kind of want a vintage cube experience, but they kind of don't. And then they kind of have like a Tinkerer cube thing every once in a while, which is weird. And again, this to me is like, I get that there's no other swords, which to me says, program some swords, man. Give us some Sophie. Let's go. This was not my number anything. I thought it was, but it's not. It was close on my list though. It was very nice. Let's see here. You guys have thrown out your number 5. Mine was higher. Let's move on here to number 4. I'll just take my number 4. It might be on y'all's list. I don't know. This card is absolutely fan-freaking-tastic. This card was like, it was sweet from the day it showed up. It was like, and it was back in the era. This was, the Scars of Mirrodin era, where everyone got the same promo. And they gave you like the best damn card of the set, which was incredible because they gave you Emrakul for like, Rise of the Eldrazi and stuff. And you're like, oh my God, this is incredible. And like when this card came out, like this card legitimately worried me. And I know it's a little silly looking back, but it legitimately worried me. It was like, guys, I'm a little afraid of the power curve we're getting on creatures when Wurmcoil Engine is the card they gave you for free. This card's amazing. And I love me a Wurmcoil Engine. It is an absolutely incredible piece of artwork by Raymond Swanland. It's 6 generic mana for a 6/6 mythic artifact creature Wurm with Death Touch and Lifelink. And when it dies, you put a 3/3 colorless Wurm artifact creature token with Death Touch and a 3/3 colorless Wurm artifact creature with Lifelink onto the battlefield. So it splits in half with its super cool abilities. It slices, it dices. It's well over $20. It seems to always be that way. For God's sake, the invention version is over $200, which is incredible because the card's amazing and I love it.
This was also a GP promo at one point, and so the idea that a promo card is usually something that like drives the cost of a card into the trash, which we've seen with like Bristlebrand and a bunch of other things. The fact that this is still $20, even though we have a GP promo of it, is quite impressive. And the other thing is, like, even though it's an artifact, it's not just good in artifact decks. It's kind of good in everything, and it saw a ton of play in a bunch of different decks, bunch of different styles of like different archetypes. It's just a win condition, and it can just go anywhere.
Yeah, there was a very funny 2-week period where the format was make as many Wurmcoil engines as you can. And you just played Phyrexian Metamorph, Phantasmal Image, Wurmcoil Engine, and like Grand Architect to put them all into play.
Great.
That was a weird 2 weeks, but it speaks to how powerful this card just is by itself, right? Another data point is this is a card that sees play over other 7-drops in Tron. You have access to 7 colorless mana. Mm-hmm. You can cast any 7 colorless mana spell in existence. It's Karn Liberated and this at 6, which are the things you go for. Oh, by the way, 6 mana, 6/6. Guess where this was on my list?
Yeah, I saw what you did there. I saw what you did there. Look,
this was not on my list because I think I talked about it recently as well.
That's fair. And
it also has one of the best translations into German. German Magic cards have very funny names, and this one is Wurm Spiral Machine.
Ooh.
Which is very good. That's a very good combination of words.
I like that.
I enjoy that. Yeah.
Wurm Spiral Machine. All
Wurm
one word.
Spiral Machine.
All together. It's absolutely terrific. I love it. And it's like the reason this thing is played in that type of scenario is because of the lifelink. It's not the Death Touch. It's a 6 mana 6/6 going to bring you back into the game and stop you from dying. That's what a Wurmcoil Engine does best. Let's move on here to Ruben's number 4. What you got?
My number 4 is a card that won a Pro Tour. I believe it either won a Worlds or it top 8 at a Worlds, and is continuing to see play to this day. In Pauper. My number 4 is Glint Hawk.
My number 10.
Glint Hawk is a 1 white mana 2/2 bird with flying that when it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you return an artifact you control to its owner's hand.
Yeah, is this the same one that was reprinted in one of the Modern Masters?
Mm-mm. It's never been reprinted.
I believe that was Glint Hawk Idol.
Oh, yeah. That's what I'm thinking. Okay.
Which they had the Glint Hawk Idol in the same set.
Yeah, they did. They printed Glint Hawk and Glint Hawk Idol both in Scars of Mirrodin.
Okay.
Glint Hawk Idol was reprinted in Modern Masters 2015.
That's the one I was thinking of. I was wondering. So returning artifacts to your hand in a set where artifacts cost, in a time where artifacts just don't cost a lot and there's a lot of them, then getting a nice little evasive beater is a good spot to be.
Yeah, and the sort of efficiency of it for Pauper is to be able to play, a 1-drop, a 2-drop, play this, pick it up, do the thing, get the effect for the other card you have in play, get the end of the battlefield ability for the artifact that you pick up or put down. Lots of different super cool options. I saw this thing come back from a crazy deficit at the Pro Tour. I recall this is where Craig Wesco was playing Conley Woods, I think it was. And,
yes.
And they said, raise your hand if you think that, Conley Woods has this in the bag or whatever. And 3/4 of people raised their hand, including myself. And then Wesco came back and won it, which was incredible. So yeah, that card is awesome.
Was good in the Quest for the Ancient Relic deck, was good in Tempered Steel, won a Pro Tour in the Pure Steel Paladin White Weenie deck.
Mm-hmm.
Just very good. I mean, and it was played alongside Signal Pest and Ornithopter and some other hits like that.
Yeah, Ornithopter, this, turn 1, pick up Ornithopter, play it, all that good stuff.
Great.
Fantastic. Nerd Girl, what's number 4?
All right, number 4. Kind of an iconic card, and I'm looking at the cost of it now, and I'm pretty upset because I know that I had 10 of these when I was at any given time, I always had 10 on me or more because I was like margin trading. It was super popular. And to this day, you know, obviously the cost is still a lot. So it's still very, very popular and a fun, different archetype. A lot of people might disagree with that, but we're going to go with Inkmoth Nexus.
Nice.
For my number 4 slot. Still a $40 land. Hasn't seen a ton of reprints. That's probably why. So we have a land that comes into play untapped. You could tap it to add a colorless mana to your pool. You can pay 1 to make Inkmoth Nexus become a 1/1 Blink Moth artifact creature with flying and infect until end of turn. And then the, you know, infect obviously is going to put your opponent on a much shorter clock, and it itself is a flying evasive creatures that can end some games really quickly. So you have win conditions built into your mana base, and whenever that's the case, you always have a pretty powerful card.
Nice. I have the secret lair drop version right up here somewhere on the shelf because I was like, damn, that is gorgeous. This was like the tattoo pack. And I was like, this is way too cool and interesting to not be worth a lot one day. This card is absolutely amazing. And like it's Blink Moth Nexus plus. I love it. And I'm hoping for a return of Infect at some point so we can get this type of thing back in standard, back on Arena, which would be great. We're not back on, but on Arena, which would be great, and go from there.
Yeah. We do have Finn the Fangbearer, so we do have poison counters on Arena. And Inkmoth Nexus is so good that it doesn't just see play in Infect decks. Both the Legacy sort of green-blue version and also the Blazing Shoal combo modern version that got banned very quickly. But also is just in artifact decks. Like, it just is good enough to sacrifice your Arcbound Ravager and deal you 10 with an Inkmoth Nexus.
I've seen
and
that.
Once again, any land that can be a win condition is going to be a powerhouse, particularly ones that activate for 1 mana. I'm not sure there's ever been one that isn't good, and Inkmoth Nexus certainly qualifies.
Like Blink Moth Nexus is already on Arena. Let's get Inkmoth. Let's go. Let's be able to pump each other.
There you go. Oh, is it up there?
It's the art.
Nice.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. All right. So let's move on here to number 3. Ruben, what's number 3?
3 white creatures in a top 10? It's more likely than you think. My number 3 is like the scariest creature that I can think of that doesn't do anything the turn you play it. Like, I see it and I go, damn, I am just dead in 2 turns to this Hero of Bladehold. I am just dead. There's nothing I can do. Hero of Bladehold is 2 generic white for a 3/4 human knight. It is a mythic from Mirrodin Besieged with Battle Cry. When this creature attacks, each other attacking creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. And it also says whenever Hero of Bladehold attacks, you create 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens that are tapped and attacking. So if you stack your triggers correctly on Magic Online, then you get 2 2/1 attackers and a 3/4 attacker. And then the next turn, instead of attacking for 7, you attack for 11. And that is a lot for 4 mana.
Yeah, this is the type of card I really like. White Weenie was my first deck, and Battlecry is also a really fun mechanic for those types of decks. So it kind of has everything, you know, it does all the things White Weenie wants to be doing. It wants to be going wide, wants to be bumping and having some sort of anthem effect, and it's all built in, and it's super well costed for, you know, decent rate, and all around an amazing card.
Damn, it's $20. I just like I feel like there needs to be a world in which you make this card and you can't screw it up. Like, it sucks that there is a way, and this is, you know, this goes back to a whole host of different triggers, but there's definitely a way in which you could just kind of mess up your opponent by asking them a question and they don't answer it the right way. And when you know you want to get the guys and you want to pump the guys that are attacking, okay, cool, whatever. Like, you know, being able to say like which trigger goes first, and you're like, what's your Esper Charm targeting? Like, we get it, it's very clever, but I wish we could just say, look, you know what the card's going to do, here's what it's going to do, let's go. I got to play Hero of Bladehold in the world of Jace the Mind Sculptor. I got beat by Jace the Mind Sculptor when I tried to play it because the card was dumb, but it was amazing when it was amazing alongside Koth, which was always fun. Nerd Girl, what's number 3? All
right, so number 3 is a card that I'm actually hoping you guys will have a little bit more insight to than I do on this particular card, because I know it's good. It saw a lot of play in formats that I am not super familiar with. I didn't play a ton of Standard at this time either, but it's still a $25 card. I know it's highly sought after. I've margin traded it, a ton. A card that comes in and out of inventories very, very quickly. And that's Green Sun Zenith. I think it's the most highly sought after Zenith of the set.
Number 5.
And so Green Sun Zenith reads X and a green for a sorcery speed. Search your library for a green creature card with converted mana cost X or less. Put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Shuffle Green Sun Zenith into its owner's library as well.
Yeah.
This card's bananas.
Card's insane.
Card's bananas.
It is.
What the hell were they thinking? Honest to God, what the hell were they thinking with this card? None of this makes any sense in the costing of cards ever. I just don't get it.
Yeah. I mean, we got Finale of Devastation, and that saw a little bit of play, but only 1 green mana is too much.
It's too much.
This was one of the first cards banned in Modern that wasn't on the initial banned list.
Mm-hmm.
Partially because of Dryad Arbor.
Mm-hmm.
So Dryad Arbor is a green creature with mana cost of 0. So basically you could play one or 2 Dryad Arbors in your deck and have Green Sun Zenith in your deck and have the effect of Llanowar Elves, but Llanowar Elves that then shuffled a Green Sun Zenith back into your deck so that later you could have copies 5 through 8 of Primeval Titan, for example. It was just way too good at playing the game that green wanted to play, because you could hit everything on the line that you wanted to hit it on. And oh, by the way, still sees play in Legacy, still great in decks like Maverick. Over the course of its lifespan, Creature Toolbox decks have used it, and there's no beating X and a green. There just is no beating it. It's
just so good. It's so efficient. And to have basically 1 mana tax, you have copies 5 through 8 of every creature that you're playing 4 of. You have copies 2 through 5 of every creature you're playing 1 of. Like all of your different little one-shots. It's just so, oh my God. So if you were curious that back in the day, was this a very powerful standard format? Yes. It was a very powerful standard format because of silly cards like this one. And it was my number 5 because this card is just bananas. So speaking of cards that are bananas, speaking of like, man, if I hit the gold with the Inkmoth Nexus Secret Lair, damn, I wish I'd have bought this one. Mother of God, this card is $1 million. This card is $1 million. They have printed it they've printed it 2 times in sort of large sets. They've made it an invocation. They made it a secret lair. This is almost a $50 card. This card is so stupidly good. It was in my cube from the moment I had it to the moment I did not have it. Consecrated Sphinx is an absolute monster of a Magic the Gathering card. It's 2 blue, 4 generic mana for a 4/6 Mythic Sphinx that has flying. And whenever an opponent draws a card, you don't even have to. You may draw 2 cards. Just crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, this Consecrated Sphinx was my number 9.
Nice.
I was actually a little surprised to see that it was still as costly as it is. I remember it's standard, and I played a fair amount of it, and I remember thinking that card was very annoying and very good. And then when I was going through the list, I was like, oh, maybe it doesn't make the list because I don't think I'm seeing it anywhere. And then I just, on a whim, decided to look up the cost, and I'm like, oh, this is $1 million. It must still be super relevant in multiple places. So I did a little more research, and yeah, this is great in basically, every blue deck is going to be wanting to run this. Every EDH deck, it's just everywhere.
Yeah. It's another, it's like a Rhystic Study, right? But it's also a Rhystic Study that you automatically can pull value out of, pretty much. Unless the person after you kills it on their upkeep, it's very difficult to deal with a Consecrated Sphinx. Much less the fact that if your opponents are drawing extra cards, your opponent has a Rhystic Study, well, then you get to go to town.
I mean, yeah, and in Constructed, it was generally you would get 2 cards off of it, and they would kill it. And if they didn't kill it, you won that game. Like that, the game is just
a 3
over.
for 1.
Like you're 3 for 1 on them. It's just bananas. And in this, I mean, in Commander, you're drawing, 6 cards or what extra for your 4-player game. I mean, it's crazy. And it's a fantastic card. But I was not expecting $50, but I'm not necessarily surprised either.
I also really enjoy the interplay of I play my Consecrated Sphinx, and then my opponent either metamorphs my Sphinx or plays a Sphinx of their own, and then we just stare across the abyss at each other. You want to draw 2? All right. Do you want to draw 4? All right. Do you want to draw 8? And we just like stare at each other until we want to stop drawing cards.
Nice.
Game of chicken.
Yep.
Nice.
Basically.
Let's move on here to number 2. My number 2 is my final hire because it's really.
My number 2 is also mine hire.
Ooh.
Also, my last of 3 hires.
Ooh.
Oh my God, we just run by number 2.
Number 2.
Woo. Well, let's do it.
I
Number
like
1.
it.
Ruben, what's your number 1, buddy?
All right. My number 1, I kind of bookended my top 10 here. I espoused the virtues of Sylvok Lifestaff and searching for it with Stoneforge Mystic. But, I mean, we know the artifact that we're going to go get when we cast a Stoneforge Mystic out of our Cawblade deck, and that is the Sword of Feast and Famine.
Yeah.
Sword of Feast and Famine is 3 generic mana for a equipment. It equips for 2 generic mana, and you know how swords work. The equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from 2 colors, in this case, black and green. When the equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card and you untap all lands you control. This was also a big deal with Consecrated Sphinx, because you could pre-combat Consecrated Sphinx, deal them damage, and then have mana untapped. This was a huge deal to play on turn 5, because you could go 3 mana this, 2 mana equip, attack, get all your mana back. It was insane in the mirror because it would take out your opponent's, later game cards, their mid-game counterspells, things like that. If you could sneak this onto either a Stoneforge Mystic or a Squadron Hawk, the game was effectively over at that point if you could protect it.
This was my number 2. Mm-hmm. It's probably my favorite of the swords. I think it's super fun and unique, and it's a fan favorite. The swords are super popular with competitive and casual players alike.
Yeah, this card is just like, well, first of all, this was my preview. When I used to get sweet previews, this was my that's how old I am, children. This was my spoiler for the set.
Remember that
was Sword of Feast and Famine, and like even then, I don't think anyone, and even Wizards, didn't have any idea of how unbelievably powerful this card was. Like, it's a $62 minimum buy, no matter which version you're finding it for. Crazy. It's $1 million. Because look, first of all, the first ability originally said they discard a card at random. That was what.
I remember that.
That's what R&D originally came up with. So my God, you're welcome. But untapping all lands you control is basically another turn. It's all things another turn except drawing a card and getting upkeep triggers or draw triggers or whatever. Because like you just had all your mana back, and it was crazy. And this thing is nuts and fantastic, and it was number 6 on my list. It was number 2 in Nerd Girl's list, as it should be. Nerd Girl, what's number 1?
All right, so number 1, this is, I'm sure it's got to be on your guys' list somewhere. It's less fun and exciting, but it's still $1 million, and it's one of the cards that I think people are always complaining about needing to get and not being able to afford. Has seen a ton of play until the end of time, and it's still $1 million, even though it's been reprinted, it's been promoed, it's been altered, it's been masterpieced, it's been everything. Masterpiece is $340 minimum, and then we've got like $65 for a Mox Opal.
This was my number 2.
My number 2 as well.
All right, Mox Opal is a 0 mana artifact legendary with Metalcraft. You could tap add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Activate this ability only if you control 3 or more artifacts. Yeah. So our 2s were like flopped, my 1 and 2 with Ruben, which is not surprising because both these cards are amazing.
Yep. Yeah, Mox Opal, I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, but I recall this taking a minute before people were like, Mox Opal's good.
Oh yeah, everyone doubted this card. No, I was there when they announced it, where they showed it off at the big party they had over in Amsterdam at the time, showing off Scars of Mirrodin stuff, and like, it was amazing because like I had never seen R&D so nervous, like straight up nervous. They're like, we're not sure if we did the right thing here. And I'm just like, I don't know, guys, but it seems pretty insane. And it sure the hell was.
And then it was.
Yeah.
Especially in Modern, where that happened.
And it's still $60+.
And still $60+.
Yeah.
I mean, he's playing Vintage and Legacy.
Mm-hmm.
And it is just it has the word Mox in it and is 0 mana.
And makes
so it's
mana.
also super popular too.
Yeah. It's got them wrong. If it's got Mox, it costs nothing and it makes mana somehow, some way. people are going to be excited about it, and that's going to be a very, very expensive card. So for my number 1, this has to be Nerd Girl's number 8 by the definition there. But for me, this is the number 1 in that it rules above all else. It is exciting. It is cool. It is powerful. It is a Timmy card in that it is a huge scary monster. It is a Johnny card in that it can whack you dead in one shot. So you will figure out how you want to do that with one shot the robot, and ultimately it's a card for the spikes because they like to win the game. Blightsteel Colossus is just a magic card, everybody. This damn thing is $75+ no matter where you're going to find it, even after Double Masters reprint and Double Masters alt version. Doesn't matter. Almost $100 for that alternate version, in fact. It's a 12 generic mana, 11/11 mythic artifact creature golem. It has trample, infect, and is indestructible. And if it would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, you reveal it and shuffle it into its owner's library instead. One shot the robot is here, and you're just whoop, you're dead. Just pow, you're dead. The end.
Blightsteel Colossus is one of those cards where a lot of the new players that have started playing, especially during COVID, who only know arena stuff, Blightsteel Colossus is a name they've heard, right? It's kind of iconic in the world of Magic, even though it hasn't been reprinted a ton in the storyline. And before I kick this over to Ruben, can we just say, the alternate art on this is one of the best alters I've seen. I typically like the original art more than alters, but this art is awesome.
Yeah.
It's the Iron Giant version of Blightsteel Colossus.
So good.
It's so sick.
The color, how the robot really pops, it's one of my favorite alters.
Nice.
Yeah. Feels like a scene from a movie, which you don't always get. You get a sense of scale even without really having anything to scale against it. You feel the gravitas of this card. Had I put this on my list, it probably would have been at number 11 because it's a, you know what I'm saying? Or
number 12.
But I also was always upset that it wasn't a 12/12 for 12, even though Darksteel Colossus was an 11/11 for 11. I get it, but it always
would it have really changed things if it was a 12/12?
It wouldn't have changed anything.
Have literally anything been different in history if that was a 12/12 instead of 11/11?
I mean, unless I can block with my 2/2 and survive, as opposed to a 12/12 where I couldn't. But yeah, I mean, this card is a main. This is the Tinker target, right? This is a very good card to put in with sneak attack and show and tell. It sees a ton of play in the places that you can play it, and that's about it.
And it does what it needs to do, and it's great in Commander decks as well. Obviously, it wouldn't be $1 million if it weren't. And that was our top 10 retro Scars of Mirrodin and Mirrodin Besieged cards. You'll see them on screen right now for your review. Take a look at my list, Nerd Girl's list, Ruben's top 10. And we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about. And we'll select our favorite to win $50 worth of anything at CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Nerd Girl.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you, Ruben.
Thank you. See you next time.
All right. We'll move here to our final slide. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsors, CardHoarder.com, and AlterSleeves.com, my co-hosts, MTG Nerd Girl and Ruben Bressler, you guys for watching and listening, and hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Follow, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at Twitch.tv at Magic Mikes, on Twitter at Magic Mikes Cast, our Magic Mikes subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.